Well, good afternoon, folks. We're still waiting for more people to arrive, but in the meantime, we'll kick off. There's a lot of content to cover here. Today, Steve Webb, our Senior Pro Solutions Consultant, is going to walk us through a topic of a different kind. We're looking at things very differently in Copperleaf these days. More specifically, rather than point solutions, we're looking at the ecosystem as a whole. So in building the content for this particular session, the word integration comes to mind, but integration really covers a whole realm of activities, intricacies, and details. We've taken the view that any flow of data in and out of Copperleaf really is integration, no matter how that might be. It might just be a rendering of a map. It may be an API flow. It may be something to do with a governance process. So we put together this content here with a relevant flow to address these challenges as organizations start to utilize Copperleaf more in a what we term business as usual type context. Steve's going to walk us through these concepts that we're talking about. Steve, if you'd like to take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So yeah, good to see everybody. My name's Steve Webb. I'm one of the solution consultants here at Copperleaf. And yeah, as Matt says, I'll be taking us through the majority of the rest of the session. So this is born out of conversations from our community events, and you'll see a lot of references here to the sort of connected enterprise. We've consciously chosen not to call it integration because integration has been the means to which you can achieve that connected enterprise. And I recognize that can mean different things to different people. It can often be quite big and nebulous and difficult to know where to start. So hopefully today I can give you an understanding of some of the capabilities that Copperleaf has to support you. We'll talk about some of the benefits and what that'll unlock, and use that to spark some ideas, conversation, and take us on to the next stage of that journey. So this is the structure for today. We'll talk about the power of the connected enterprise, some of the challenges we see, and then how Copperleaf can help connect the IT ecosystem and that enterprise, and some of the specific capabilities we've got there. We'll do a very brief touch on sort of what's new, but in the context of the connected enterprise as well. And then, yeah, as Matt says, Q&A towards the end. So I'll make sure to leave time for that. So the power of the connected enterprise, what is it? I've touched on this briefly where I'm saying integration is not the goal. Integration is by the means to which we can deliver a connected enterprise and therefore maximize our agility, value, and planning excellence. And commonly we see, and we would recommend a sort of typical sort of customer journey along that path to a connected enterprise. And so this will be familiar to a lot of you, I expect, because we're speaking with a lot of customers who are somewhere along that journey. You might not necessarily be at the start, you might be somewhere in the middle. And we recognize it's also a continuous journey. New platforms and systems emerge, new capabilities come to market, and there will always be a need to revisit and revise and update. So the first step in that journey is to lay the foundation. Commonly this is done as a standalone implementation of Copperleaf, and this lets us accelerate that time to value, letting us make those decisions that we need to be able to do, as say regulatory submissions or anything else that we need to prepare for, actually build our investment plans. And part of that, by starting standalone, is it isn't just software, it's making space for that people and governance transformation. There's a much wider sort of process change around implementing something like Copperleaf and changing how you work as a business. Moving forwards, once we've got that solid foundational layer, we can then start to connect your enterprise, incrementally adding in additional data layers, automating data transfers where applicable, and therefore reducing any sort of residual manual workload. That can be GIS systems, APMs, EAMs, financials, anywhere that you store data that you need for decision making, or once you've made your decisions that you need to output those investment plans or informed decisions to. And once we have started to connect that enterprise, it becomes a sort of iterative loop where we can start to tighten that bond and tighten the relationship between planning and execution, which commonly we've seen is it can be quite two sort of verticals or siloed and maybe don't necessarily interact with each other as much as they could. And therefore, we start to feed those actuals and reality, what's happening on the ground and what's been executed, back in to the solution to then be able to deliver agile plans and sort of continuous living, breathing plans rather than a sort of static snapshot in time. And I'll just talk to some of these customers. This is by no means all our customers that are going through this process, but these are some of that are live right now following this journey and at different points in that journey as well. So now we've understood the process. The next thing is to consider, what are the common challenges we see in delivering that connected enterprise. The reality for most of us is we deal with aging infrastructure, increasing expectations, typically tightening budgets and mounting external pressures or strategic objectives. By taking that foundational approach, we start to get those under control and with Copperleaf. And then the next most common barrier is those disconnected systems, which can limit your ability to get the maximum risk or to mitigate the maximum risk and maximize the return on your implementation. So putting a bit of color to what these challenges can be, specifically to a connected enterprise, is that spatial context. So, considering projects in space, not just as a line in a database, and being able to deliver additional benefits through cost savings or combining investments. There's then reporting, which commonly has been potentially a static data sets, which can limit the accuracy of forecasts, and potentially push it with those sorts of static data sets can create a bow wave of unmanaged risks in future. There's then the challenge of enabling the continuous planning process, limited ability to rerun scenarios. It can very commonly be aspirational to want to be re-optimizing monthly, quarterly, but in reality, whenever this has been done manually, it might be a yearly or a 2-yearly exercise, becoming a sort of painful manual process. And then process efficiencies, and this is sort of part of that journey. That any sort of residual manual data exchange can create significant loss, but we recognize that some instances exist where the manual data exchange is the best solution. It's the best return on time. And with those processes, we want to be able to audit them and ensure that the full governance is applied to that throughout data flow. And lastly, that manual data entry. There can be a lot of time spent reconciling data and sort of doing that sort of manual ETL process to manipulate it into a new structure, ultimately causing delays in building the plan, and potential for inconsistent data across systems, or possibly duplication as well. And all this is to say that the standalone solutions, sort of laying that foundation, offer a huge benefit. And as you continue along that journey, these challenges become sort of closer to the top of the pile, and we can unlock additional value with some wider capabilities of Copperleaf. So if we take those challenges, and we'll use these challenges to sort of map us on a journey across the connected enterprise and what that looks like. And I'll cross-reference these continually through the presentation, so hopefully you can sort of wayfind as to where we are in the journey, and map it back to some of those challenges or themes that you might see, and how Copperleaf might help resolve them going forwards. So considering this as a full ecosystem, we have Copperleaf as the sort of master of decision-making, master of investments, where we can undertake sort of from the asset ground up predictive analytics, or for a top-down approach across capital allocation. And we have that as the center, this diagram. And then we have a range of asset-focused systems on the left. EAM solutions like SAP, IFS, Ellipse, Maximo, APMs or GIS systems as well, Esri, Hexagons of the world. And Copperleaf consumes data from these systems. We take a lot of data from these systems to help inform our decision making. And we derive insights, and once we've come up with our investment plans, we want to pass them off to delivery or financial systems on the right. We can flow those decisions downstream into those systems. And you can see here now where we've got that sort of consistent data flow across the screen from left to right. Keeping those systems aligned manually can be time consuming and can often result in misalignment. And across this whole sort of data flow and process, we also have workflows and approvals, which is a capability within Copperleaf to ensure that the governance and auditability and transparency of that data is applied and it aligns with your business processes and whatever stage gates you might have. So moving forwards, what we'll do is we'll start to explore each of these components individually and how those relate back to the challenges we talked about at the start. And we'll start with GIS systems. So decisions within a spatial context, what is the benefit of that? Well, for one, we can deliver additional value. So identifying bundles or work packages for tactical planning purposes, and visualize spatial clusters of risk for strategic planning. And this is one of the capabilities as part of our interactive GIS module. Those assets don't live in tables, they exist in space and time. And that interactive GIS capability brings us into the strategy and planning world. Another benefit is integrating that GIS system. So we remove data duplication. We're not, with interactive GIS, we're not migrating data across the Copperleaf. Instead, it's an embedded experience so you can visualize those assets and investments. And then efficiency increases. So we're not moving between multiple logins or different systems, disparate systems, and we're not having to sort of create a sort of intermediate analysis. We can start to do all that within one UI under one login. and with that deliver a strategic advantage. So previously or historically, maybe we didn't have those spatial layers, fire risks, flood risks, rising sea levels, any of those spatial challenges that we have data sets for, we commonly use in our day-to-day planning work, and so why shouldn't we be trying to integrate those within our decision making as well? And then finally, speaking of interactive GIS, it's an out-of-the-box solution. This isn't building custom integrations or custom development to integrate with your platform. It's a ready-to-go connector that we're deploying across many customers now. And that means it's tried, tested, proven, and it's quick and easy to roll out so as you can get value from it as soon as possible. So what we'll do that now we've covered some of the benefits and understood what it can do for us, we'll have a look and see what does that actually look like in reality. So in Copperleaf, we can have investment maps. We can go in and directly through the UI, edit investment geometry, select investments in space and add those to select assets in space, add those to our investments, or modify sort of auto-generated investments from predictive analytics, for example, to start to do that sort of spatial bundling approach where we notice nearby assets which for logistical reasons makes sense that we address as part of this investment. This is part of that spatial visualization of that asset risk, and you'll note here that we can actually view this evolving over time. And with that, we can identify pockets of high risk or where risk is evolving more significantly over time, and ensure that we have investments that address that risk. And if not, directly from the UI, select those assets and create investments from that to address that risk in time. And then, we've talked about assets and investments in singularity. Now we start to consider full scenarios, looking at that spatial relationships between multiple investments, and seeing how these evolve between different scenario runs and starting to do scenario comparisons. So if we have a different set of business constraints, how might that scenario look with a higher budget or a higher capital budget or a higher risk mitigation strategy over time as well, and ultimately understanding what that cost. So to give some examples of some of those data sets that we can connect through other sources, I think I touched on flood and fire risk. I think I mentioned climate change scenarios. That's one of the major ones that's going on at the minute, but also ground condition, socioeconomic, understanding the spatial distribution of investment. Potentially there's large development plots ongoing, and that might present a risk in future. And then ultimately delivering these into future systems like BIM or digital twins, or generating data sets from scatter or sensor data. It's also worth noting that we recognize that commonly GIS systems can also be the most up-to-date asset register. As your EAMs and Maximos and Ellipses, as they catch up through their periodic refreshes. With this direct integration, we can see any of these data sets sort of in, not necessarily say real time, but as soon as they are updated on the GIS system, that will flow directly through to Copperleaf. So moving forwards in our journey now, I'll start to talk about data visualization, business intelligence. So back to that challenge that we talked about, obviously dashboards and reporting and what we do with the decisions out the back end. So storytelling with data. One of our most transformative or recent additions to the product suite is self-serve analysis. And you'll have heard us talk about this probably over the last at least 12 months. And it's been very much an incremental release rather than holding back on those capabilities until it's fully feature rich. We recognized that there was significant value just from incrementally releasing these to customers to start getting value sooner. So self-serve analysis is our next generation data visualization and reporting. Really considering those specific communications needed for strategic decisions, and recognize that this changes from organization to organization. So it's no longer about prescribed data sets or prescribed dashboards. It's about enabling you, our customers, to be able to discover and understand those outcomes in the way that makes most sense to you or your business. And really taking that sort of Copperleaf to the boardroom approach as well. Taking that data, which can sometimes be vast and lots of insights, and distilling it down into a story that can be understood at any level of the organization. And we achieve this through 3 pillars. One is data, and recognize that to deliver an effective story, we need numbers and details to make that decision in Copperleaf, as well as connecting across that enterprise and bringing that data in from other systems where necessary. We need visuals to be able to represent that data and be able to tell that story. And then we need a narrative that sits across that. So, what questions have we asked to result in this data? So, for example, there are different scenarios or different business constraints, and how did we derive this as the sort of recommended solution? And sitting in the center of that Venn diagram is self-serve analysis, where it's a narrow focus where we want to bring all these 3 components together to deliver them to you, to empower you to be able to build data sets, build visuals, and build narratives with your data, all within a sort of easy to use and understand user interface. And so what that looks like is an embedded experience. It's on-demand visualization of those results. It's expanding access to that Copperleaf reporting capability, including an embedded dashboard designer. So similar approach to what we were talking about in the GIS world, where it's not having multiple logins. We can start to take that approach where it's an embedded UI. It's a single login. You can go in, you can manipulate dashboards, you can publish the reports, and you can view the outcomes virtually immediately. There's 2 key components to this as well in terms of connected enterprise. One, high-speed data download. So all that data that's generated is available as summary data sets, focused data sets. So you can do offline comparison manipulation, because we recognize that there's still a need for that. This might not solve every single use case. But then there's also automated data transfer. And this is porting that data to your infrastructure so as you can use it on your BI tool of choice. And also being able to manipulate those data sets. So manage and corral those data sets into the format and structure that you need. And these 2 last bullet points are the 2 key ones that we'll focus in on. So in the context of the connected enterprise, on that data transfer, we have a capability referred to as the data pipeline. It's cloud native. It's an out-of-the-box solution. No custom development required. Similar principles and approaches we're doing in GIS, and it will automatically route data to your infrastructure for use in your business intelligence tool. that could be, most commonly Power BI is what we see. With this comes the benefits of scale. We're seeing growing asset and investment populations. No longer are we limited by that row count of Excel, which forced us to have to make some suboptimal decisions and start to aggregate data together. We could really start to output very granular data sets very, very fast with data governance. So everything's monitored, error handling is embedded, troubleshooting if an error does occur, and if we need to come back and look at this in future, full traceability and auditability. And with all these components, we get speed and self-serve. So the outcome of all these is users can access those insights without reliance on your central IT department, without reliance on consultants such as ourselves or third parties. It's really enabling that self-serve to let you manage the insights and data that you own. The other component of this was the data set building. And this takes us into a capability we have called Data Lake Builder, which just went into release in our most recent release, 25R1. And essentially that lets you manage those data sets in Copperleaf. So we have a full sort of range of data sets that we will output automatically, but potentially you want to manage and manipulate them yourselves. You want to create joins between data sets for specific views related to your reporting requirements and what you have to report on either to regulators or execs. You can augment that with external data sets as well if you want. If there's other data sets which we haven't ingested automatically through the rest of the connected enterprise, then we can import those directly and start to layer them on top. And all that delivers us that advanced analytics capability. Lets you generate composite dashboards of external data sets as well as Copperleaf data sets. And lets you get new insights into the decisions that are being made and understanding at a much more granular level or an aggregated level the investment plans that you're creating and generating. So how does all of this look? So I talked about the embedded experience. This is one view of one of the scenario comparison dashboards. So they use as a core dashboard, which is deployed with all implementations now, which include SSA. We can view individual value measures and how they evolve over time throughout our value framework. We can see aggregations by value measure or by strategic objective. We can look at some of those decisions that have been made on those individual investments. What is the value change? How much has it moved in time? And we can, in this example, review how does that aggregate or total risk evolve over time. And so using that embedded dashboard designer, you're enabled to modify this dashboard, change the visuals, change the data sets that are sitting underlying this to create the story and the narrative and ultimately the message that you want or need to be able to move forward with the investment plans and give confidence in the decisions that are being made within Copperleaf. And we've seen a significant amount of success with this already. So we've got 3 customer examples here. Network Rail, we talked about the speed element of this. So rather than one optimization run per day, with the speed of this data transfer now, that can be 7 to 8 times a day, including time to understand the results, understand the stories that might sit behind it, generate those visuals, and bring new stakeholders into Copperleaf. Those who might not be say, typical investment planners. Instead, they're interested in the outcomes and the insights that those investment planners generate. And then that scale component. We went from thousands and disaggregated down into millions of assets. And initially there's a speed component to this as well. There was a significant wait time, and we're now down to sort of minutes, which is very transformative from where we were on our previous reporting platforms. And then national grid and that simplicity element. We talked about the dashboard designer and personalizing and creating audience-specific stories. So that could be for execs, it could be for regulators, or it could be for other internal departments or teams. Being able to really help them understand the decisions that are being made. Okay. Now, moving on into the continuous planning challenge that we've seen at the bottom here. We'll look at how do we enable continuous planning in Copperleaf and how do we link in those financials and project management systems. So we recognize the world moves on, and the challenge about continuous planning and the need to be able to do a continuous planning approach is that we make optimal decisions. We come up with optimized investment plans, but as time moves, we need to revisit those decisions. We have new emergent work. It could be reactive due to weather events, operational events, delays to programs. Commonly we see programs delayed or shifted in time for operational reasons. Once field crews get on the ground and are faced with the reality of exactly what's required to be done, and subsequently cost overruns commonly, as well as strategic changes from an organization, potentially budget changes and budget allocations internally, or external factors such as regulatory changes. So how do we respond to this, and how do we help support this within Copperleaf, deliver a continuous planning approach? Well, typically when we look at that foundational layer, when we lay the foundations for the Copperleaf implementation, we cover scenarios 1 to 5 here. We collect investments, we build the plan, we get it approved, we build the plan, we optimize it, we approve it, and then we get it ready for execution. And we have an extension to this, an element called performance management, which helps us then close that loop. And so this takes us into that continuous plan and a cycle moving around where at point 6 here, we collect those actuals from the delivery and financial systems and create comparisons. With those actuals, we can reallocate budgets through re-optimizing the plan against any value measure or KPI within your value frameworks. And with that ability to re-optimize, that lets us make sure that at any point in time, we're ensuring the highest value plan is being delivered, so we can respond to, for example, if a project delay or a project start has been delayed, it might make available some budget to bring forward a project to execute it earlier. If there's a cost overrun, which means we're exceeding the business constraint, we can understand the trade-offs that we need to make to be able to meet our business constraints for that year. And then ultimately review performance and update the assumptions. So we recognize we've made assumptions going into the plan, and we can use that feedback loop to inform future plans as well. Finally, with that sort of continuous loop, we're able to communicate wider outside of the investment planning teams what has changed and why. We can directly correlate these back to changing investments, moving investments forwards or back in times, or changing priorities. And with that, we generate what I would term a living plan. It's not a sort of static point in time. It can become a continuous living, breathing thing that we always update. And that is a shift in business process, but that's what performance management can enable us to do. And so we talked about those connected insights, and this is where we start to see where two of our challenges are combining here. We're talking about self-serve analysis and the reporting capabilities, as well as the need to do continuous planning. Well, we can have embedded dashboards that let us compare versions of those plans and actually understand specific performance management metrics or value metrics, and be able to compare them between different scenarios to understand the key variances and at any level in the hierarchy as well. So I'll not go through these in detail because I should have covered these in the conversations today on performance management, but the key one there is that decision agility. We're able to re-optimize and reallocate to ensure that we're always delivering the highest value plan within the business constraints we have at any one point in time. Next, I'll move on to talk about process efficiency and the workflows and approvals capability that we've got within Copperleaf. So all investments have a life cycle. They'll start from an initial needs capture into a long-term, move towards a short-term, into a portfolio, and then ultimately to be delivered through once they're approved. And we recognise that businesses have stage gates and processes and governance to apply, which can commonly be a manual task managed over email threads and makes it limited auditability or traceability. And so Copperleaf workflows and approvals lets us digitize this and really ensure that we're applying this organization wide. And so that can look, we've got a reasonably complex workflow and approval, but we can build organization-specific workflows. We can have delegations, for example, in periods of leave, and we can use these workflows to execute between systems and actually help us with that connected enterprise and the data transfer. So if we have new data comes in, we can send notifications, or once a plan's ready to approve, we can use workflows to then move those to execution systems. And with this standardized approach, it lets us move faster. Investments can be automatically updated. So, for example, once it's approved and moved to a delivery system, we can lock those investments in Copperleaf to prevent any future changes. If through that performance management loop we receive a reforecast, we can then unlock it. We can pass it to a workflow to unlock it and notify specific users that they need to review this and then submit it for approval again. And the common thread throughout that is the traceability and auditability track. So that governance and the compliance is applied throughout. And so is we can go back, understand what has changed, when and why, and if necessary, why. So again, I'll not talk through these, but we've covered all three of those key benefits across Copperleaf workflows and approvals. And we'll come to the last point and the last business challenge, which is the manual data processes. And most commonly we see these with APMs and APMs, or APMs and EAMs, sorry. And you'll have probably seen or heard or referenced Copperleaf Connect. And I've consciously kept this very short because that is one of the ways in which we can interact with data and reduce that manual data entry, but it's not the only way. So I like to refer to Copperleaf Connect as the bridge, and that's the underlying support for all those capabilities that we've talked about. It's a standardized, fully documented, system agnostic way of doing two-way data exchange. So it's not a sort of specific capability in itself, but it helps support all those wider activities we've seen where we're flowing data in and passing data out of Copperleaf. By taking that sort of connected enterprise and standardized approach, it's secure by design, again, fully auditable and traceable. We start to eliminate and remove any human error and helping that planning agility by being able to move data faster and more efficiently. So examples of that are triggering investment updates when we refresh EAM or APM data, or once we're satisfied that an investment plan or a single investment has been approved, moving it across to a PPM solution or project management. It could be IFS, could be Microsoft Project, Primavera P6. So it's not just about Copperleaf Connect isn't just about syncing data because we can. It's about enabling that flow of data from end to end from those asset systems out to delivery. And so that takes me back to the start. You're following along, but we've looked at those GIS systems and some of that interactive GIS capability, how we can start to resolve that spatial challenge. We've looked at the data visualization and BI and reporting capabilities within Copperleaf and how we can start to resolve that challenge all within a connected enterprise. The continuous planning loop around project management systems and financials and bringing those actuals back in and be able to make very agile decisions. The process efficiencies with the Copperleaf workflows and approvals capability to really start to speed up the sort of the life cycle of that investment and make sure we can generate insights faster. And then lastly, into the sort of work management and APM data where we can bring that in to Copperleaf to then flow that through ultimately out to the PPM and delivery. So what's new? Well, first off, our approach is part of, we're now part of IFS, and we have been for going on a year now. But our strategic directive is AI first, all in. So we continue to develop Copperleaf to keep it the industry-leading product in AIP, and we believe the route to this is by enabling and deploying AI-based solutions. And this will be an augmentation and not necessarily a replacement. Taking some of those sort of potentially mundane tasks, volume tasks, automating those to let users sort of use the brains and make the most of human intelligence to focus on that high value work. And all this is with an industry solution focus. So as we understand, different industries have different challenges and making sure that we're addressing those challenges on our roadmap and we can surface those challenges and make sure they feature in a roadmap coming up. So what does this look like? These are what we've most recently released in 25R1. So we have an AI-enabled investment reviewer. And in the context of a connected enterprise, we can connect this to your knowledge base articles now. We can either directly import them or connect them directly to it to create business-specific criteria. And we can generate new insights and do this at a much larger scale rather than necessarily investment by investment. We'll start to do this across all investments. We have Data Lake Builder. I touched on this as part of the reporting challenge. In the connected enterprise context, we can connect those external data sets, we can bring them in, we can combine them, and we could do all this without reliance on IT or external consultants. And we can also undertake parallel approvals now. And this is part of the latest release. So we've seen, we have one of the challenges we're solving with workflows and approvals around process efficiencies, where historically that was a linear workflow. We can now start to run approvals in parallel to shorten that time to approval, still giving us that full governance and control and auditability, but ultimately getting approval faster and notifying where we need to. And so what next? Well, I appreciate I've covered a much broader range, or a very, very broad range, I think I was unsure, across the whole IT ecosystem. So we can support deep dive sessions into any one of these particulars. There's much more lying behind these than the couple of minutes that I spent on each of them. We can do specific demos in any of those. We have much more detailed scripts. We can bring those to life and help you understand how that would apply to your data. And even then into more detailed webinars in this sort of format, a wider audience, where I know we've done these in the past where we focused in just on one element, for example, performance management or interactive GIS. And all that being said, it's ultimately what we want to do is accelerate that journey. So we've laid the foundations. Hopefully we're all now looking towards how can we extract additional value, and Matt, myself, the rest of the organization are here to help you along that journey to maximize the value you can get out of your Copperleaf implementation. Just to say thanks. You have Matt and I, my emails. By all means, shoot us a message direct if you've got any queries offline, and we can pick those up and make sure we get a response.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve, and thank you for those who are able to attend. We look forward to meeting you at the next webinar that these schedules are being published. Thank you.
Thanks.